Hello, everyone. My name is Shashank, and I'm an equity research analyst here at Revelata. And today we're going to be on our second tutorial with Uber, where we're going to be going over the cost build, the depreciation schedule, and the consolidated financials section of Uber. And the reason why we want to do a cost build is so we can understand the different operating costs that Uber faces. The depreciation schedule is needed so we can find our total depreciation amount each year. And then our consolidated financial section is where we're going to walk from revenue down to EBITDA. That way we get a better understanding of the pre-tax profit for Uber. So to start things off, we'll go to our Uber input sheet. And again, this is our playground for our revenue model, as well as our operating costs, D&A schedule, and also our consolidated financials. So as you can see here, I've already done our revenue build. And if you have any questions regarding that, please refer to the first tutorial on Uber where we went in depth on how to build this revenue model right here. So to start things off in this tutorial, we're going to go over their cost build, which is going into each of their operating costs. We're going to go into their D&A schedule, which is the main goal of this is to find our D&A amount. And then additionally, their consolidated financials, but we're trying to walk down to EBITDA. So to start things off, we're going to need all of our historical data. So I've already used deepKPI's Excel added-in data to get the historical costs, historical D&A, which is known as depreciation and amortization, their historical purchase of property and equipment, also known as CapEx, and their income/loss from operations. But as you can see, I still need to get their historical PP&E amount. To do that, I'm going to go to the deepKPI tab, click search deepKPI. Here, we're going to type in our ticker, which is going to be Uber. And right now it's going to pull all of Uber's data and KPIs. Now we can search for property, and then we can go to report in tables. Under 8, we see property and equipment. If I click down here, we can see the different property and equipment, and just click on this box right there and click import to Excel. And what it's going to do is it's going to automatically import in all that data to Excel for me. If not, I would have to manually copy and paste each of these values, which would take a pretty significant amount of time. So now that we have all of our historical data, one thing I do want to highlight is say one of these numbers looks off. I can click on the number itself, and what it's going to do is it's going to open a pop-up, which is going to show me where exactly deepKPI got that data from. For instance, we can see the form type, which is essentially the 10K, 10Q, or 8K, the filing date and reporting period, and also the number itself. This way I can audit any data point I want. So going back to our build, our next step is to input this data into our KPI aggregator as such. And we simply just drag and drop that across. So our next step now is to actually get all of our data from our KPI aggregator into our input sheet. To do that, we can simply just link the corresponding cells for each of our costs to that KPI aggregator sheet. We can do the same thing for all of our PP&E. And then also do the same for our D&A. And then our CapEx, which is known as that purchase of property and equipment. And then finally, our income/loss from operations. We can actually derive this number as well, but we'll put it in as a historical value that we can double check our calculations later on. So now that we have all of our historical numbers, our next step is going to be to start projecting these into the future. To do so, we're going to need some drivers. So the first one is cost of revenue, and we're going to project that using cost of revenue per trip. To find that, I'm going to take the total cost of revenue in Uber and divide that by the total trips on Uber's platform, which we found in our revenue model. We'll do that for all the historical periods. Our next step is to find and project the remaining operating expenses except D&A. To do that, we're going to simply find the operating expense as a percentage of revenue and do that for all of our different expenses as well as historical years. Now, our next step is to get an assumption value so that we can use an assumption value for the projection periods. To do that, we're simply going to take the average of the last 3 years, and that's going to be our assumption going forward. And then what we can do is we can simply hold this assumption constant going forward, and always feel free to play around with any of these assumptions. Now we need to find the actual numerical value. So for cost of trip, we can simply multiply, cost of revenue, we can simply multiply the cost of revenue per trip times the total trips on Uber's platform and do that for all of our future projection years. For the remaining segments, we can simply multiply the respective percentage by the total revenue on Uber's platform. And we'll do that for everything but our D&A. Our D&A expense, we're actually going to link up to our D&A schedule. That way, once we fill out that D&A line item later on, it will automatically fill out our cost bill. Now to find the total cost on Uber, we simply take the sum of all of our individual segments. So now we found our total costs and expenses for Uber. Our next step is going to be working on our depreciation schedule. So to do so, we're going to first fill in some of our different line items for the depreciation schedule. So our net PP&E end of period, we can simply link to our historical values. Now our beginning of period PP&E is always going to be the previous period's end of period PP&E, so we can simply link that as well. Our CapEx, we also found using deepKPI's data, and we can simply drag that across. Same as well with our depreciation. Now, Uber has additional line items that factor into the change from beginning of period PP&E to end of period PP&E. So we've consolidated this as an other line item. And to find that value, we simply take the ending of period PP&E, we subtract out our beginning of period PP&E, and we subtract in CapEx, and then we add our D&A. And we can do this for all of our periods. Now, the next step, what we'll do is we'll link our other section up to that value. So our next step now is to actually start projecting each of our individual line items. So the first thing we're going to do is our period depreciation. So how we're going to do this is we're going to use something called implied useful life. And to calculate that, you simply take the ending of period PP&E and divide that by that period's depreciation. And this gives implied useful life. Now, for going forward, we'll just take the average of the last 3 years and hold that average constant going forward. Now, to find the actual numerical value in our projection periods, we simply take the last period's PP&E for the ending period PP&E and divide that by the current year's implied useful life. We can carry that forward as well. And what we'll do is we'll link this end of period PP&E up to our D&A schedule at the net property equipment ending of period. And right now, these numbers are simply going to be 0, simply because we haven't filled out our depreciation schedule. Once we fill that out, all these numbers will fill into place. Now, to project our CapEx, we're going to find CapEx as a percentage of revenue. And we'll do that for all of our historical periods. And then going forward, we can simply take the average of the last 3 years as our assumption and hold that assumption constant. Now, to get the actual numerical value, we simply multiply that assumption by the total revenue on Uber's platform. Now, our last step is going to be to find the actual other segment. To do so, we simply take the other and divide that as a percentage of revenue as well. And we can carry this forward just as before. We take the average of the last years as our assumption and hold that assumption constant. To find the numerical value, we simply multiply that percentage by the total revenue on Uber's platform. And we can carry that formula going forward. Now, our next step is to actually link up our depreciation schedule and fill it out. So again, our beginning of period PP&E is simply going to be the previous period's end of period PP&E. So we can simply link that up as such. Our CapEx we found when we projected as right there. We can simply link that up. Same as well with our depreciation. And then our other line item we also projected. Now, to get our ending of period PP&E, we simply take the beginning of period PP&E, we add our CapEx, then we subtract our depreciation, and then we add that other segment. And we can simply drag and drop that across. As you can see, all of our remaining values automatically populated. The zeros that were originally here turned into actual values. And additionally, in our cost build, our D&A line item also got filled out. So our last step now is going to be to fill out the consolidated financials table. So first, for our revenue, we can simply link up to our revenue build up top. For the total cost and operations, we can simply link up to our cost build as well. And we can simply drag these all the way across. Now, to find the income/loss from operations, we simply take our revenue and we subtract out our operating expenses as such. And now our last step is to find our EBITDA. To do so, we're going to first find our depreciation, which we found in our depreciation schedule. We can just link up as such and drag and drop that all the way across. And now to find the actual EBITDA, what we're going to do is we're going to take our income/loss from operations and we're going to add our depreciation to that and simply carry that formula across as well. So now we've officially completed our build and you can see we have arrived at our final EBITDA. Now, say you want to do a quarterly build. For instance, in this, we did an annual build. The exact same methodology would apply, and you could also use deepKPI's Excel add-in and data to do a quarterly model as well. Thank you for watching.